Just been doing the DVD commentary for Four Lions this afternoon. We come directly from there. So Sam and I have just spent 2 hours in a dark room talking about Four Lions. I feel like anything I say now might be extremely facetious and flippant.
It's probably worth mentioning that we took about 5 years to write that film, because it was one of those subjects where it was just so unclear how it would work, if it would work, if it could work, if we were allowed to write it, if it would ever kind of come together. So we spent a lot of time in the room with Chris, the director and co-writer, discussing it from every angle, and it was really a very kind of thrilling challenge to see if we could pull it off. We're a bit like a comedy cell ourselves, really, of subterranean individuals trying to figure out how you might, if you had to, which apparently we did, write a comedy about terrorists. And I think, if it works, it's probably because we spent a long time mulling it over and talking over for hours and hours, really.
I don't think they were, I'll tell you, I spent 2 hours in the movie theater, Chelsea, at 4 o'clock, watching it. It was a packed audience, all of whom were howling with laughter, so whatever you did and however long it took you, I don't think they were lionizing terrorism or terrorists. They were just making a funny
lionizing
movie.
comedy?
Yes. Well, they were lionizing something. I'm not sure it was called Four Lions, but
right.
I think there was such merit in what they did, not because of the subject matter necessarily, but because of the character work. They just really did great characters.
Here's a quote that you gave. You said, "There should be no fear of failure when you're writing comedy. I don't understand what we're all afraid of. We've got stories to tell, so go and tell them." Mm-hmm. So, Caryn, you're a producer of comedy. Mm-hmm. People often say there's a conflict when you're a producer of comedy. Do you concentrate on drama? Do you concentrate on characters? Do you concentrate on the narrative? What are the central elements you look for or try and guide writers such as Sam, Jesse, and Simon in terms of coming up with good comedy?
Well, I usually just stand back and let them do their work. But the general idea is character, character, character. When you're talking about comedy, story is almost, it's less important, although you have to be able to tell a very, very good story.
Right.
Answering you, but I'm also happy to say that all those elements have to work in concert together, or you don't have a product that you can continue to watch. A movie is different than a television series, and the architecture of a television series is really different. Sometimes people pitch ideas and you say, well, that's a movie idea. That's not a long-running television idea. You have to love, like Simon's characters are the ones that Sam and Jesse have done. You have to love them forever, for a really long time, and that requires a different DNA. So that's what we concentrate as the DNA of the characters. Would you guys agree with that?
Yes, you do have to sort of like them, but you have to be comfortable with them. And so if you divide the characters into victims and oppressors, which I after the event always do, and it seems to fit nicely, then you have to not suffer too much with the victims, and you have to enjoy the oppressors' cruelty, but not but not excessively, because cruelty shouldn't be encouraged, and so it's very complicated, to say the least. But essentially, you have to like to be in the same room as them, which is the
you want to have to have a couple of beers with them.
Yeah.
One of the things I'd like to ask all of you, and perhaps each of you could take a shot at this, when you're looking at game-changing comedy and game-changing comedy for television, if we look, for example, over the last 10 years and look at something like The Office, the Ricky Gervais vehicle, which obviously the format translated into America, when you're thinking now of what might work, how do you approach the whole construct of what you yourselves as writers think might work? Do you build it around a character? If you're looking, for example, at something that could really change things, Men Behaving Badly was a real change maker on television. The Peep Show, in its own way, really took on a completely different kind of take in terms of the construction of the comedy. When you're thinking of presenting something, how do you come about thinking of these comedy constructs? What does one do, Caryn?
Well, I'm a producer, I'm not a writer, so I look for what's not there. And as a viewer and a license fee payer, I look for what I think should be there. And then I try to imagine what kind of character might have a whole bunch of loaded information. In the case of these two guys, or these three guys, the concept of men and where they're at seemed to be something they wanted to talk about. And at the time that we did Roseanne, for example, we looked at the landscape and realized not only were there not any females on television in America as leads at the time in 1987, but there were no working class people at all on American television. The last woman had been Mary Tyler Moore, so we knew that it was a missing element. So you look to see, first of all, as a producer, you look to see what's not there, and then you talk about, if you can, what should be there, and then you talk to writers who may or may not be interested in those subjects. Their inspiration comes from, I don't know, heaven. I think I don't really know how they do what they do, but that's what we do. That's where we begin.
So Simon, men behaving badly obviously has been well established now, but when you're thinking of new constructs, what are the kinds of influences you look at? I mean, we're now, who for example would be comics or writing that would appeal to you? Do you look at someone like Dennis Potter, who wrote drama but with good comedy speckled into it? How do you...
I try not to be inspired, really. I try to be inspired by... I've tried to be inspired by anything. It's by bad comedy, actually. I do think finding something unimpressive, it's a terrible thing to say, isn't it, when I started. Something bad on television is, it's encouraging, because you think, well, I can do so much better. I'd agree, having seen that clip. But so I think, but I mean, essentially, just riches is what you look for. You look for just a great big fat subject, and after that.
So you look for subject or character first?
Well, they're hard to divide, but
right.
But a big fat subject that you can dump your characters in the middle of and see how they get out of it and what they do. Because if it's a long-running series or a movie or anything, the worst thing is that you get to two-thirds of the way through and you realise, my God, it's an empty box I'm working in here. You just need to be continually throwing things out of the, and making things, reducing rather than just yanking in stuff. So you just want a great big subject, and that can lead you anywhere. I mean, also practicalities then immediately rush in, and you find yourself, perhaps it's a sad commentary, but thinking, what's the main character, and then within a second after that you think who can play him or her, because they are so linked now if you want to get anything on. So it's a kind of pollution in a way to have to think perhaps that early on the practicalities, but that's life.
So what are you working on at the moment other than your Doctor Who episode that you just recently had last week that you wrote?
Well, that was nice, just to come, a whole lot of characters already there. I was given an area to, so that, that's nice to, it's more of a, tight corner you have to get out of. But I'm pitching loads of things at the wall. I've always thought the answer is to work on 15 things at one time, because surely somebody will warm. The right constellation of channel controller, producer, funny, will line up, whereas otherwise they'll all go awry. So I do think creative people should, as we like to call ourselves, should put pressure on themselves to see what sort of splurges out. But I personally don't like looking for a kind of zeitgeist thing, because I think that's the road to madness, and the zeitgeist moves and you realise it's just past. The fucking zeitgeist has gone out the window. So if anything, I look for something that isn't popular, and then in the hope that in 3 years that will be a red hot item.
So Sam, when you were playing around with the whole idea of the Peep Show and somewhat shifting some of the core constructs of comedy, was there anything that influenced you in terms of thinking of the characters? Were Mitchell and Webb two actors that you had known of and you'd thought of as being vehicles for this? Give us a little sense of how that kind of gestated and came into full TV view.
Yes, well, David and Robert were always going to play those characters before we even wrote it, and we knew them very well, having written with them before. So that was an enormous help, because it meant the series hit the ground running, and when you can already hear what the character will sound like, because the actor writing the dialogue is so much easier. So that was a wonderful advantage.
So that, just as a writing tool,
Yeah.
is an effective way of you positioning how something might look or feel or turn out.
Absolutely, because at the end of the day, like it or not, you are servicing the cast as writers. They are your front of house, they're your shop window, and you have to make it work through them. The show won't work unless the cast work. So having a character that fits the actor like a glove, because we could obviously design the characters around the performers as we did with those two, is that, you know, you can't put a value on that really. It's very helpful. Obviously, you need to get the casting right, but I think we did with Peep Show. What's interesting about, if you say compare, I think Men Behaving Badly with Peep Show, because they are similar, obviously, two guys sharing a flat, is I think the eras they were made. I mean, Simon's show is obviously a multi-camera studio audience show, and ours is a single-camera show, and I think that was reflective of the eras. The times changed, you know, during the two shows being made, where there are many, many less of those shows now being made, the studio audience shows, certainly in this country and also in America. And shows like Space, shows like The Royal Family, shows like The Office, which came before our show, showed a different way of doing sitcoms. You could do it with a visually challenging and visually different style, and I think we wouldn't have done Peep Show the way we should do it with the point of view camera without those shows to come before it.
And also Simon's How Do You Want Me, which was a single camera show that was influential on us, which came way before.
Masterpiece, yeah.
And Jesse, in terms of the way that the two of you write, if you come up with an interesting idea, how do you bounce off? Do you develop a stream of dialogue? Do you develop an overall theme? How does to try and get someone in the audience to understand the process of what it takes to be a comedy writer?
It's great that's one of the best things about having a writing partner, because you can come in with a bit of something which you feel like there's something comic there, and I'm sure everyone in the audience would have had this, you know, something which just seems very funny, but when you say it out, it's just a scrap of something you heard on the bus, or something somebody said in the pub, or just a weird event, and you really need somebody receptive to go, yeah, sometimes, you know, 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, it'll just be the first funny thing you exchange in the morning with your colleague, who I'm lucky enough to have as Sam. But sometimes that little thing is like, oh, that could be a character. That's a thing. Or people do that now, don't they? Or people have stopped doing that, and it might become a plot. It might become half a line. It might become a whole series if you're lucky, and you never really know where it's going to lead. And it's, I mean, I don't know how Simon does it, not having that. Maybe he talks to himself in the morning, but I'm very lucky to have Sam to sort of have a sounding board to sort of try and grow those ideas.
So, Caryn, if you're a producer, you've got to be the interface between the writers and then the TV network, let's say BBC or ITV or whatever the case might be. Mm-hmm. And whilst you're gestating something in comedy that would be very, very funny in the workshop or on the computer, obviously you've then got to go and pitch to someone at the Beeb. What's that process like? What does it actually entail?
I don't know, try to make it simple and get out is pretty much just try to, you know, get it done in 10 seconds and say as little as you can. Pitch it in one sentence. It should be able to be pitched in one sentence, and it should just sing its own song really, you know, quickly. I was wanting to make an observation, though, about comedy. It's much more common that there are partners in comedy than there are in drama. I don't know why, but I think it's punch and counterpunch. Comedy, you know, they say dying is easy, comedy is hard, and that's because it really is, it is harder. I mean, there's no doubt about it. So the other thing I do is I support in every possible way the writer's work, and I protect and I defend it, and supposedly what we're supposed to do is be responsible for quality control so that all episodes are as good as all other episodes. Really, in drama, sometimes the way that it works is there's a good episode, there's a not so good episode, there's a bad episode, there's, you know, it could range. And our task is even harder because we really are supposed to, especially if BBC and Channel 4, et cetera, would repeat the comedy more, which what we would all like to have happen, is to have the audience slowly discover it. You know, The Office was discovered, and we can't promote it. So, you know, we rely on our broadcaster to love it, and an audience can smell if the broadcaster loves the show, and the first clue is that they repeat it. So we have to keep all those episodes really solid. We can't afford to have a misstep. That makes it even harder for production.
So if you're looking at stylistic changes in the same way that if you go back in every decade, there seems to have been a change going back to the Goons, to Monty Python, to Not the 9 O'Clock News, to Men Behaving Badly and to the Peep Show, where effectively is the current trend built around behavior that's not very stellar, because Men Behaving Badly and the Peep Show is not exactly stuff that would be approved by...
Well, nobody is ever going to be earnest, no character. So, of course, they won't have stellar behavior ever. No comic character ever knows what they're doing. They're all idiots. Everybody doesn't, they don't know how they're going to react. Nurse Jackie, life has gotten very, very absurd. So I think we are headed toward a more sort of absurdist style of comedy. We're back to maybe even the 60s in that regard, just because life is complicated and it's a rich mix. We're not depicting, unidimensional characters. All of our characters have to be very rich.
So do you think that when you're writing now, you're also aware, for example, political election, new prime minister, does that factor into some of your thinking and your writing, or do you really still look at structure, character, authenticity of the character?
I'd love to think I'd sit and think of authenticity of character. So let's say I do that. The good thing about writing comedy as opposed to drama is that you get an immediate response from yourself. And if it's drama, you're guessing the whole time. There's more variables. You're guessing whether the acting is going to be moving. You're guessing whether the plot will come together. It's a very sort of it's just a nice gut. You work on your gut as a comedy writer. So that comes first, and after that you can have the luxury of often post-rationalising whether it's whether you are speaking for a generation, which is always a ridiculously pompous thing to say, but I like I say, you don't want to set your spiritual bar too high if you're working in comedy, because it'll just it's embarrassing when it fails. Let other people judge you on that. Also, if you're working on at the silly end of the comedy spectrum. It's unseemly to make grand claims for authenticity but we all love it when we surf a wave, but it's often by luck.
So when you are constructing, for example, a particular episode, the way that you write it, would you look at maybe building 4 or 5 gags during the 27 minutes or 28 minutes that you'd have of writing that particular show? Or do you look at it on a more kind of holistic basis where you've got an unrolling, unfolding character and plot line, and effectively you're developing gags built around that basic format?
Yeah, the plotting for me and Jesse, I think, is the hard bit. It's the bit we had to learn. I think dialogue, maybe generalising it, but I think either you can write it or you can't in many cases. It's kind of, do you have a voice, ear for it? Plotting is like engineering or building a table. It takes technical know-how, a lot of experience, trial and error, a lot of hard thinking. It's not the fun bit, as it were, but for us it's probably the most important, because once you have a good structure of a story, then having a dramatic structure, which is obviously similar to the way you might write drama, but then you can have all your fun, but you've got a good place to end up. And yeah, it's even more true of film. I think you've got an hour and a half rather than half an hour to fill. You need to create a bridge to get across that.
So what made you feel, for example, that the construct of the Peep Show just somehow you felt just right?
Well, it didn't feel just right. We did 2 pilots and they both had major problems. We did a series and then we hopefully improved it after that. And that's one of the great things about TV, is that you can actually do your rough drafts. Luckily, both pilots weren't broadcast, so we could do a rough draft in private. And then you launch your series and you've actually done a lot of work beforehand, which is wonderful, because you never know. You can think you can guess this will probably work, but to do it in that way, we love doing that, because it just gives you a chance to fail and learn.
So really, from a comic writer's standpoint, there should be no fear of failure whatsoever, because you just pick yourself up again and write another line.
And there are lots of people to tell you if you've failed before it gets to somebody important's desk. Directors, producers, script editors, loved ones, family, children. If you're foolish enough to share it with
dog,
even. So it's the bad laughing at you rather than with you reaction should be got out of the way early. And then and it's always, compared to the press's reaction, it's always fine anyway, because you just have to get hardened to people saying hurtful things like, "Is this a joke?" Which is or when shouldn't the action start before page 13? You know, so that sort of. But I mean, like I think when you start writing, you think it's just going to be, especially in comedy, it's just going to be a whole load of people chatting, and the funny will get you through the whole. But then the longer you write, the plot becomes just the bedrock of the whole thing, really, and then let the jokes come to fill the void.
And Caryn, do you think that there's a great need for comedy? Are you finding that the commissioning editors at the TV networks are always looking for something new, or are we kind of in a bit of a rut at the moment looking for a new stylistic outbreak?
I don't know about style, but I know that traditionally the network with the most popular comedy is the most popular network. That comedy, although often slagged off more than my daughter used to say something when she was 6, she said, everybody's a cricket. And, everybody is a cricket of comedy. So in drama, well, she said cricket. But that's what she said.
But she said it incorrectly, Caryn.
She didn't.
So.
Right, thank you very much. So I don't know why, but critics take more shots at comedy, even though, as you can see, the complicated and complex form of intelligence that they have to bring to bear, because of course it's, what they said about Ginger Rogers, it's dancing backwards and in high heels. They have to do drama as well as comedy. So it's underappreciated, and if I had said anything else, just as a genre, it should be more valuable, or treated as more valuable, because it's axiomatic. It's true that if you've got a great schedule, it's like balanced meals. You have to have both. Now, and I don't know whether that's trendy or not, or whether they're buying more or less, but I know it's true that the best, the golden ages include really good drama and really good comedy.
So effectively, you've got to have that dramatic component to drive good comedy. That's one of the cast iron rules.
You have to have a story.
Right.
Larry David, all of us, we
now, who doesn't know Larry David here in the audience?
Everybody here.
Everybody knows Larry David. He wrote Seinfeld. Curb Your Enthusiasm. And
the thing about Larry David is, with Curb Your Enthusiasm, and the genius of Seinfeld, I think we'd all agree, was the plotting. And he took these characters and he put so much inside of them that if he just hit one and he knew it would pinball off the other one at a certain point, now he doesn't write scripts, he just does story points and has actors who know they've got to hit a story point and they can improv because the dialogue is, they know their characters so well. So for them, that's such hard math. They're doing, three-dimensional chess every time they write something. It's very, very dense and engineering, plumbing, use any metaphor you want. Without it, everything falls down. So.
And Curb Your Enthusiasm is also written by Larry David.
Yeah.
And that's been successful as a...
Well, it's successful. Yes, it is successful. Yes.
It's what it isn't is a hugely high rating
but it made
show.
a lot of money.
Exactly, but I think it's one of the interesting things that we were talking about. What the new, what the new shows are around, and what the new thing is in comedy. And
so would that be a cult show?
Yeah, it's a cult show, but it's indicative of, in the case of Larry David, it's a bit of a trend. It's the master having a good time.
So what kind of trends like that do you see here, for example? Because with the
we do
BBC putting a
trends.
lot more effort into Manchester with animation, yet Britain has never really produced something like The Simpsons that's had that kind of 20-year success.
They could, Britain could.
Well, one of the interesting things which Sam touched on before, and there's a big thing for us, I don't know if it feels overly technical to the audience, but this thing of the multi-camera show, which is the show with studio audience where you hear people laughing, versus the show where you don't hear that and it's shot realistically like The Royal Family, like The Office, like Gavin and Stacey. And Sam and I write this show.
Partridge.
Or Alan Partridge. Well, Alan Partridge, done with an audience, but slightly different feel maybe. But Sam and I write this show called The Old Guys for BBC One, and Simon has written both. Caryn, you've done both. And I think historically those shows which have a laugh track and they're shot in front of an audience are the ones which get the really enormous audiences. They're the, Only Fools and Horses, these shows that might get 20 million people watching and the whole nation will gather around, and Like Men Behaving Badly did. And Peep Show, which is a popular show, might get, if we're very lucky, 2 million people watching it, compared to these shows of the past that might get 20 or 18 million. And I guess it's an interesting question for us, whether it feels like that people are not going to come back to that era of having shows which have a huge audience, whether that moment has passed or whether another one will come along. I don't know.
I don't know, the form of it is less important because it's evolving, it's always evolving. And now the Americans just have their upfront presentations where the American networks are now announcing the comedies and the dramas that they're picking up for next season, which will premiere, in September. And I think it's pretty evenly split between audience shows
Really?
that they picked up and single camera shows. So we don't know. I think animation, to your point though, Fox just picked up 2 more animated things, and so did, I think, ABC. So, it's less important than I don't know. Modern Family just was a big hit. I don't know why.
So animation is just a
All of sudden,
variation.
Family comedy. Family comedy was dead, and now it's back.
So animation is really a variation on a theme because Family Guy, The Simpsons, obviously created a lot of influence in America. That obviously must seep back here into the UK. In some
I don't
form.
know. It's hard to say why animation hasn't taken hold here, but it's a perfectly good. We work in a big genre too. That's the other thing. We've got warm, toasty family comedies on one end, and we've got the thick of it, on the other end. So we are, we're fluent in, many Baltic languages.
So let me ask the 4 of you. There's a well-known American show. Some say that it was a game-changing show called Breaking Bad. How many of you are familiar with Breaking Bad?
I don't know that many.
Anybody in the audience know that show?
Not that many.
Very unusual. Do you know that show?
Yes, I do.
You do.
I've never seen it.
Never seen it?
You say?
I'm
Jesse?
familiar with the name of it.
Karen, just
well,
give an
I'm
outline
familiar
of
with
what
the name
the
of it.
story is.
I said it first.
Karen, this is taking a really quite difficult subject.
Yeah, well, that subject matter is a guy who, is a chemistry professor, finds out he's dying of cancer, doesn't have any money to support his family, and decides to go into business with a younger guy and open a methamphetamine lab.
And that's the theme for the show.
That's the theme of the show, but played by the genius Bryan Cranston, who was in, what's that wonderful show with the, what's it called? Thank you. Like The Sopranos, it looks like, and even like Nurse Jackie, it looks like it's a drama, but, it's really funny. But Sopranos, you could have pitched it like some schmo from New Jersey, with the family, has some bad business dealings, and possibly a mother is driving him nuts. That's the comedy pitch. So what's happening a lot in America on the edges of American television, which is the cable networks, is that's the stuff where we're all interested. We blend in our minds. We're all fluent. And that's what I was saying. We're bit by bit rebelling against being ghettoized into just doing comedy, 3 gags a page, like it used to be from the sitcoms. We used to have network executives with literally looking at a script going, tick joke, tick joke, tick joke. Wait, that's only 3 jokes. There should be 4 jokes a page on this. Where's the 4th joke? So that's where we all started, and now the comedy is subtler because we're living in a more, I think, absurd world. So if it's trending anyway, I think in America it's trending toward blending of the two because the jokes are richer.
And isn't it also you can do more racy stuff on cable television than you can on network television in America, whereas here, on Channel 4, for example, you've got more leeway than you would have on network television in the States.
Yeah. I mean, it's so bizarre. I mean, if you asked anybody to explain actually how British television works, it makes no sense. Let's be honest, there's just no sense at all. So, I don't know why. I can't explain it.
So who are you writing your stuff for? Are you writing for
Anybody
a dozen
who'll buy
commissioning
it.
editors? How does it work?
Yes.
Sam?
I write it for Jesse, mate. I just try and make him laugh and stop beating me. That's a partly serious answer because I think you do.
Now is not the time. But I have the syndrome that Nurse Jackie's doctor has, so I'm pleased that you put up with me with the grabbing.
I have my crosses, I bear them. But no, we do it on a creative level. I think you have to try and please yourself. You have to write for yourself. Otherwise, no point. If you go out there thinking I'm going to try and write for this audience or that person or this is what these people will want, I think you're basically broken before you've begun. You have to, on some level, just go, what do I like? What do I find funny?
Absolutely.
What would I like to see? And if you do that, you've got a chance. You won't get it right every time, but you've got a chance, and you have to start that way, I think.
So what do you guys think of Sacha Baron Cohen as an example? Has a huge success with Borat, movie that cost $14-15 million to make, took nearly over $100 million at the box office. A certain kind of situational comedy with him, first of all, as the, and most recently the movie he did as the fashion guy. What do you think of that
I'm
stuff?
slightly anxious, and I'm going to be po-faced now, about coming back to cruelty, about the way that cruelty is deeply embedded in what he does, and I've laughed. I preferred the.
You mean embarrassing the subject?
Yeah, just kind of just in the knife, and it's all about squirming comedy, really. But I don't know. I preferred the Ali G movie, which was actually scripted, and nobody was hurt in the making of, apart from But then I say that now, and of course, then you have a couple of drinks, you think, yeah, we deserve to. Gary Lineker deserves a good satirical beating. There's no room for too much po-faced reaction. But I think it'd be nice to see him doing something like he cares, what I think. Something, to show something slightly more, kind.
So really,
he ended limply.
It seems as if part of the objective is to do something racy, yet something that structurally fits into the narrative flow of the characters and the piece. And it's not just a question of one or two interesting gags or interesting lines. You've got to have much more continuity, and so that the thing hangs together over more than one, obviously numerous episodes, a long-running series with basically a theme that each week changes in its form, or at least changes the gags.
Yeah, but mainly racing.
Mainly racing. So how racy could you be on British television?
That was a slightly facetious remark, I should say. In terms of raciness, we're very lucky with Peep Show because we don't have any censorship. As Karen says, it doesn't really. There's no kind of rules and regulations as there are in American TV or network TV. So much Channel 4 have been very free with us, and that's great. The creativity, you can write whatever you like, and it's a very nice situation for us.
Jesse, any further thoughts on that?
I keep on mishearing racy for racist, so I thought it was taking an unpleasant turn. I thought we don't want to do any of this racist material on any channel. No, I think that it's, we have great freedom, and part of the flowering of American TV in the last 15 years has been HBO allowing people to do these shows like The Sopranos, and latterly the shows that like Nurse Jackie, Showtime also, who do these shows like Nurse Jackie and Hung, and a new generation of shows where they're not exactly comedies, they're not exactly dramas. Calling them comedy dramas is almost underserving them because it feels like they're not half and half. You're getting a real full dose of both, and I think they're creatively stimulating to us.
I love them, and I really don't even watch network television myself anymore.
Well, she said it.
Well, there she said it. There she said it.